They grabbed her by the shoulders and tore at her work pants, the fabric ripping with a violent sound that echoed across the construction site. When the denim split and her lower back was exposed, the three men who had been laughing seconds before went completely silent. What they saw etched into her skin made their faces drain of color and their hands drop to their sides. Want to know what made these construction workers freeze in absolute terror, and why the same men who were assaulting her were begging for forgiveness within minutes? Drop a comment telling us what country you're watching from and hit that subscribe button, because sometimes the people who seem most vulnerable are the ones you should fear the most. The morning sun blazed mercilessly over the Riverside Industrial Complex, turning the concrete and steel into a furnace that would test every worker's endurance before noon. The air shimmered with heat waves that distorted the skyline, making the distant mountains look like mirages floating above the desert floor. Heavy machinery roared constantly, a symphony of diesel engines, hydraulic systems, and steel on steel that created a wall of industrial noise. The smell was pure construction site. Hot asphalt, welding fumes, and that particular cocktail of dust, sweat, and machinery oil that clung to everything and everyone. Cranes stretched toward the sky like mechanical giants, their arms moving slowly across the horizon as they positioned massive steel beams with precision that belied their size. Concrete trucks rumbled through the site roads, their drums rotating slowly to keep their loads from hardening in the brutal heat. Sparks flew from welding stations where crews worked to beat the deadline on what would become the largest shopping complex in the region. Safety vests dotted the landscape in bright orange and yellow, moving between materials piles and equipment stations with the organized chaos of a major construction project. The foreman's voices carried across the noise, coordinating activities between different crews, calling out safety reminders, and keeping the massive project moving forward on schedule. Radio chatter crackled from various job sites, updates on material deliveries, weather warnings, and the constant stream of communication that kept hundreds of workers synchronized in their efforts. Air compressors hissed and hammered with pneumatic tools, creating a percussive background to the larger symphony of construction. In the midst of all this controlled chaos, one figure moved with quiet efficiency that set her apart from the bustle around her. Maya Rodriguez worked without fanfare, without announcing her presence, without demanding attention or recognition. Her movements were economical and precise, each action serving a specific purpose in the larger puzzle of bringing this massive project to completion. She wore the same safety gear as everyone else, the same work boots, the same hard hat, but something in the way she carried herself suggested competence that went deeper than standard construction training. Her tool belt was organized with military precision, each instrument in its designated place, clean and maintained despite the harsh working conditions. When she knelt to inspect foundation work, her movements were controlled and deliberate, never rushed despite the time pressures that drove everyone else to hurry. Her hands traced concrete joints and rebar connections with the practiced touch of someone who understood that structural integrity wasn't just about following blueprints, but about reading the materials themselves for signs of stress or weakness that might not show up on engineering reports. Most of the workers moving through the site barely noticed her. Another contractor, another specialist brought in to handle some technical aspect of the project that would be completed and forgotten as the construction moved to the next phase. In an industry dominated by men, female workers were becoming more common, but they still had to prove themselves daily in ways their male counterparts took for granted. Maya seemed content to let her work speak for itself, completing her assignments efficiently and moving on without seeking credit or recognition. Under the shade of a materials trailer, 4 construction workers had been watching her with increasing interest that had nothing to do with her professional capabilities. They were iron workers, brought in specifically for the high-altitude steel work that required both physical strength and courage to work hundreds of feet above the ground. The crew had developed a reputation for being tough, aggressive, and dismissive of anyone they perceived as weak or unsuited for construction work. "Check out the form on that one," said Rick Dawson, nudging his partner with an elbow while maintaining his stare. His hard hat was tilted at an angle that somehow managed to look both casual and arrogant, and his work shirt stretched tight across shoulders built from years of hauling steel beams into position. "Bet she's never worked a real construction job before today." The others laughed with a kind of appreciation that had an edge to it, the sound of men who had decided someone was fair game for their entertainment. "Probably got this gig through some diversity program," added Tommy Chun, wiping sweat from his forehead with a rag that had seen better days. "Look at how careful she is with everything. Like she's afraid to get dirty. Maybe we should go offer some hands-on training," suggested Marcus Webb, the youngest of the group, but eager to prove he belonged with the veteran crew members. His safety vest hung open despite regulations, and his swagger suggested someone trying to project confidence. He didn't necessarily show her how real construction work gets done. The fourth member of their group wasn't participating in the commentary. Danny Morrison stood with his arms crossed, jaw working like he was chewing on something that tasted bad. Late 30s with the kind of weathered look that came from years of outdoor labor. His eyes held the calculating expression of someone who had been looking for trouble and thought he might have found it. He'd been having a rough month, passed over for a promotion to crew chief, written up for safety violations, and generally feeling like the world owed him something it wasn't delivering. "You know what bothers me about types like her?" Morrison said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had been doing this work longer than the others. "They come in here with their college degrees and their safety certifications, thinking they know better than guys who've been building things since before they were born." One of the newer workers glanced at him uncertainly. "She seems to know what she's doing, Danny. Haven't seen her make any mistakes." "Appearances can be deceiving," Morrison replied, already starting to walk in her direction. "Besides, we've got a responsibility to make sure all contractors are following proper safety protocols. Can't have someone getting hurt because they were too proud to ask for guidance." The others fell in behind him, drawn by that magnetic pull of potential confrontation that construction workers found irresistible when the job was going slowly and the heat was making everyone irritable. They spread out slightly as they approached, not quite surrounding her, but definitely establishing a presence that couldn't be ignored. Their boots crunched on the gravel and debris that covered the work area, announcing their approach with the deliberate heaviness of men who wanted to be noticed. Maya sensed the shift before she heard their footsteps. Something in the quality of the noise around her changed, became more focused and predatory. She glanced over her shoulder once, just long enough to catalog 4 men approaching with the kind of swagger that preceded trouble. She went back to her work, checking the alignment of anchor bolts with a precision level, but her shoulders tightened almost imperceptibly. Her stance shifted subtly, weight distributed differently, ready to move in any direction if the situation required it. When she adjusted her position to check the next measurement point, she moved with controlled grace that spoke of training that went far beyond standard construction safety courses. Small adjustments that most people would miss, but that demonstrated awareness and preparation that had been earned in circumstances far more dangerous than any construction site, because Maya Rodriguez wasn't just someone who inspected structural integrity for commercial buildings. She was someone who had learned to evaluate threats and defensive positions under conditions where making the wrong assessment meant people died. And the moment these workers decided to test her, they were going to discover exactly what that training had prepared her for. The confrontation began with bureaucracy disguised as concern. Maya was using a digital level to check the grade on a concrete pour when Morrison's shadow fell across her workspace. She had flagged an inconsistency in the foundation that could cause settling problems once the full weight of the structure was applied. Standard procedure required documentation and correction before the project could proceed. Need to check your credentials, Morrison announced, his tone carrying the artificial authority of someone who wasn't actually in charge, but wanted to sound like he was. New safety protocols require verification of all non-union personnel. Preparing and narrating. This type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Maya straightened slowly, brushing dust from her knees before turning to face him. Her safety certification was current, issued by the state licensing board and valid for commercial construction projects. She handed over her documentation without comment, the official papers properly stamped and signed by the supervising engineers who had verified her qualifications. Morrison examined the credentials like he was some kind of expert, though his own certifications barely covered the ironwork he was hired to perform. Says here you're certified for structural inspection, but doesn't specifically mention high-stress load analysis. Structural inspection includes load analysis, Maya replied calmly. Has since the code updates 18 months ago. One of the ironworkers snickered. She knows the regulations better than you do, Danny. Morrison wasn't backing down. He'd committed to this course of action, and his pride wouldn't let him retreat without some kind of victory. Regulations just updated again. New electromagnetic safety protocols. Can't have unauthorized electronic devices near sensitive equipment. The site supervisor looked up from his clipboard, frowning. Morrison, what the hell are you doing? Routine safety inspection, boss. Just making sure all contractors are in compliance with the latest protocols. What protocols? Maya asked, though she already knew where this was heading. Electronic devices, recording equipment, transmitters could be concealed in clothing. Full compliance check required for anyone working near the structural systems. That was a complete fabrication, and everyone within hearing distance knew it. But Morrison was banking on her not wanting to cause a scene or delay the project by challenging his authority. Construction sites operated on tight schedules, and any disruption could cost thousands of dollars in delays. Another ironworker pulled out his phone, sensing entertainment value in the situation. This might be worth documenting. Put that thing away, Chun, the supervisor warned. But the kid just grinned and kept the camera ready. Maya stood there for a long moment, looking at this man who thought he could intimidate her with fabricated regulations and false authority. She could have demanded to speak with the project manager, could have called the main office to verify the protocols he was citing, could have simply walked away and let the supervisors sort out the situation. Instead, she began unbuttoning her work shirt. Jesus Christ, she's actually doing it, Webb whispered, his voice carrying a mixture of excitement and disbelief. She pulled the shirt off and set it aside, standing there in her work pants and tank top, her posture straight and her expression unchanged. The ironworkers stared with the ugly fascination of men who had created a situation they weren't mature enough to handle responsibly. Satisfied? She asked, her voice level and professional. Morrison's grin widened. He was enjoying the power, the control, the ability to humiliate someone in front of an audience. Turn around. Full inspection required. Maya turned slowly, the afternoon sun highlighting the definition in her shoulders and arms that came from years of physical conditioning that went far beyond construction work. But it was what the sun revealed on her lower back that was about to change everything for everyone watching. As she completed the turn, 5 distinct marks became visible across her spine, just above the waistline of her work pants. They weren't decorative tattoos or random designs. They were precise, angular, technical in their execution. Each mark was different, but clearly part of a coordinated set, like unit insignia that had been burned into skin rather than sewn onto fabric. Most of the workers watching didn't understand what they were looking at. Chun was still recording, grinning as he zoomed in on what he thought was just interesting artwork. Check out the ink. Probably got those done during some wild weekend, but the site supervisor felt something cold settle in his stomach. He'd served 8 years in the Army Corps of Engineers, had worked on military construction projects, had seen enough classified briefings to recognize certain types of markings when they appeared in places they weren't supposed to exist. That's when project manager Sarah Collins walked around the corner with 2 safety inspectors from the main office. The clipboard in her hand hit the gravel with a sound that somehow cut through all the construction noise around them. Her escort inspectors looked at her in confusion, then followed her gaze to the woman standing half-dressed in the middle of their work site. "Sweet Mother of God," Collins whispered, because those marks weren't random tattoos. They were mission designations from classified military operations, the kind that got buried so deep in government files that even people with security clearances weren't supposed to know they had ever happened. Each symbol represented a different type of classified operation that officially never existed in any military records. A chemical compound symbol crossed with biohazard warnings, indicating involvement in weapons disposal operations, where failure meant civilian casualties in the thousands. Satellite coordinates overlaid with encryption codes, marking participation in intelligence-gathering missions that prevented international incidents from escalating into full-scale conflicts. A medical cross intersected with lightning bolts, representing biological threat. Neutralization in environments where traditional protective equipment would have been useless. A drone silhouette surrounded by targeting reticles, documenting participation in precision elimination operations where collateral damage wasn't just unacceptable, but would have created diplomatic disasters. The 5th mark was the most telling. A skull wearing night vision goggles, crossed with wings, the universal identifier for operators who had conducted missions in territory where capture would have meant disavowal by their own government and execution by foreign powers. Collins had spent 12 years in military procurement, working directly with special operations commands to provide equipment and support for missions that existed only in the most classified corners of the defense budget. She'd seen the after-action reports before they were shredded, had coordinated supply drops for operations that were supposed to be impossible, had processed requisitions for equipment that didn't officially exist for missions that never officially happened. She knew about the operators who completed assignments that prevented catastrophic failures in global security, then were given new identities and placed in civilian positions that utilized their unique skill sets while keeping them invisible to foreign intelligence services. These weren't soldiers who had simply completed their service and moved on to civilian careers. These were ghosts, people whose military records had been sealed at levels that required presidential authorization to access. Maya Rodriguez wasn't just some contractor who happened to know construction techniques. She was a ghost made flesh. Someone whose very existence in civilian life represented successful completion of missions so classified that acknowledging them publicly would compromise ongoing national security operations. The kind of person who had prevented disasters that would have made international headlines if they had been allowed to happen. Morrison was still enjoying his moment of power, completely oblivious to the fact that he had just exposed someone whose cover identity was protected by federal law. "See anything you want to report, contractor?" he asked with that same ugly grin. Chun was still recording with his phone, zooming in on the marks like he'd discovered something worth sharing. "On social media, this is definitely going viral. Check out the detail work on these designs." Maya began to turn back around, her movements unhurried and professional, like she was completing a routine inspection that had been assigned by someone with actual authority. That's when Collins found her voice, and the words that came out carried the kind of command authority that made every piece of machinery on the construction site seem to quiet in respect. "Stand down, Morrison, now." The effect was immediate and dramatic. Every conversation in the immediate area stopped. Every tool went silent. Even the distant sound of heavy machinery seemed to pause as the authority in that command cut through the industrial noise like a blade through silk. Workers who had been focused on their own tasks looked up to see what was happening, sensing that something significant was occurring even if they didn't understand the specifics. Morrison spun around, his face cycling through several expressions, as he realized who was watching and that his moment of entertainment had suddenly become something much more serious. "Ma'am, just conducting a routine safety inspection under the new electromagnetic protocols that came down from corporate." "I," said Stand Down. Colin's voice carried the kind of authority that came from making decisions where the wrong choice meant operational failure and compromised national security. She walked across the gravel with deliberate steps that announced her rank and authority. To everyone within visual range, the two safety inspectors with her, both former military themselves, hung back. They didn't understand exactly what was happening, but they recognized the look on their project manager's face. It was the same expression she got when classified communications came in from higher authorities, when routine construction projects suddenly became matters of national security concern. "Ma'am," Colin said quietly, her tone completely different from the command voice she'd used on Morrison. "You can get dressed." Maya nodded once and began pulling her work shirt back on, her movements maintaining the same unhurried precision she'd used to remove it. No embarrassment, no anger, no demand for apologies or explanations. Just the quiet dignity of someone who had endured far worse situations than public humiliation and had survived them all with her professional composure intact. Chun was still holding his phone up, finger hovering over the screen controls. "Ma'am, should I upload this footage to the company safety database for training purposes? You will delete that footage immediately, or I will have you terminated and blacklisted from every construction project in this state." Colin's voice was deadly quiet, the kind of tone that made smart people stop asking questions and start following directions without delay. "Terminated? But she's just a contractor doing inspection work. Delete it now, Chun. Every frame, every backup, every copy. And if I find out you've shared it with anyone, you'll be explaining yourself to federal investigators who don't have a sense of humor about classified personnel being compromised by social media posts." Chun's hands shook as he fumbled with his phone, the video disappearing with a few taps before he shoved the device back in his pocket like it had become radioactive. The implications of what Collins had just said were starting to sink in, and the entertainment value of the situation was rapidly being replaced by the realization that he had almost made a career-ending mistake. When Maya was fully dressed again, Collins stepped closer, close enough that her next words were meant for Maya alone and wouldn't be overheard by the workers, who were pretending to go back to their own tasks while straining to catch any details of this unexpected confrontation. Nightshade Operations was officially disbanded in 2019, Collins said softly, using terminology that confirmed she knew exactly who she was dealing with and what those marks represented. "Officially," Maya replied, her tone neutral but acknowledging the shared understanding between them. "There are no service records for your missions. No documentation, no official recognition, no veterans' benefits tied to that work. That was the point of the program. Plausible deniability for operations that couldn't be officially sanctioned, but were necessary for national security." Collins studied Maya's face, seeing details there that most people would miss. The way her eyes tracked movement without appearing to watch anything specific. The slight scarring on her knuckles that came from close-quarters combat training. The way she stood with her weight distributed, always ready to move in any direction. A defensive posture that had become so ingrained it was unconscious. "You're not supposed to exist in any official capacity," Collins said. "Your civilian identity should be completely separated from any military service record. Neither are half the weapon systems we used overseas, but they kept us alive long. Enough to complete our missions, Maya replied. Sometimes what's supposed to exist and what actually exists are two different things. That response told Collins everything she needed to know. Because Maya was right. The Riverside Industrial Complex wasn't just a shopping center construction project. Buried in the foundation work were communication relays and monitoring systems. That didn't appear on any public blueprints. Installations that required security clearances and specialized knowledge that went far beyond standard commercial construction techniques. Unless Maya's clearance levels ran deeper than her contractor credentials suggested. Unless she was exactly who Collins suspected she was. There was no legitimate reason for her to have access to those systems or knowledge of their existence. The fact that she was here, working on structural components that interfaced with classified installations, meant her cover identity had been specifically designed to provide access. While maintaining plausible deniability, Collins turned to face the assembled workers who were watching this exchange with growing realization that they had stumbled into something far beyond a routine safety inspection. Morrison looked like he wanted to disappear into the concrete. Chun was pale as desert. Sand. Webb kept glancing between Collins and Maya like he was trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. "Everyone out," Collins said, her voice carrying absolute authority. "Now, ma'am, we've got scheduled structural work that has to be completed." "Before the concrete truck arrives," Webb started, trying to salvage something from the situation. "I don't care if you've got the Secretary of Defense scheduled for a site inspection. Clear this area immediately. Anyone who discusses what just happened will be terminated and escorted from the property by security." The workers scattered like debris in a windstorm. Morrison tried to linger, tried to explain, tried to salvage something from the wreckage of his authority and the growing realization that his career had just taken a dramatic turn for the worse. "Ma'am, I was just following standard safety protocols. New electromagnetic security measures that came down from corporate last week." "Morrison." Collins' voice was quiet now, which somehow made it more intimidating than when she'd been issuing commands. "Report to my office at 1500 hours. Bring your supervisor, your crew chief, and your union representative. We're going to have a detailed conversation about what safety protocols actually mean and why fabricating regulations to humiliate other workers isn't covered under any training manual." Morrison's face went white. A meeting with the project manager accompanied by supervisors and union representation usually meant paperwork that followed construction workers for the rest of their careers. The kind of documentation that made getting hired on future projects significantly more difficult. When the work area was empty except for Collins, Maya, and the two safety inspectors who were maintaining their distance while trying to understand what had just occurred, Collins pulled out her phone and dialed a number that wasn't listed in any corporate directory. "This is Collins at Riverside Complex. I need immediate verification on contractor credentials for Maya Rodriguez. Priority authentication, security level alpha." She listened for a moment, her expression growing more serious with each passing. "Second, I see. And what's the classification level on her previous assignments?" Another pause while she received information that was clearly significant. "Understood. What about current operational status and cover protection requirements?" A longer pause this time, during which Collins' expression shifted from professional concern to something approaching respect mixed with apprehension. "Copy that. And if someone had hypothetically compromised her cover identification through unauthorized recording?" Collins listened to the response, nodding slowly. "Understood completely. Thank you for the clarification." She ended the call and looked at Maya, who had picked up her inspection equipment and was calmly checking calibration settings like nothing unusual had happened. The level of professionalism Maya maintained despite having her cover blown and her classified background exposed spoke volumes about the kind of training and operational experience that had shaped her approach to crisis management. "They tell me you've got clearance levels I'm not authorized to ask about," Collins said carefully. "Then don't ask," Maya replied without looking up from her equipment. "But I can provide whatever support you need to complete your assignment. Additional security, alternative work schedules, whatever you need to minimize exposure risks." Maya looked up from her instruments, meeting Collins' eyes directly. "I just need to finish the structural verification and file my report. Same as any other project. After what just happened, you want to continue working after your cover was compromised? This inspection has to be completed correctly. Lives depend on getting these structural details right, and that responsibility doesn't change based on what just happened." And that response told Collins everything she needed to know about who Maya really was and why she had been placed in this position. Because someone who had completed classified missions where failure meant catastrophic consequences didn't stop working just because their personal situation became complicated. They understood that the mission always came first, regardless of personal cost or risk to their own security. For the next 4 hours, Maya worked with the kind of methodical precision that made experienced construction managers take notice. She didn't just inspect structural components according to standard protocols. She understood them on a level that went far beyond engineering manuals and certification requirements. Her hands moved over concrete joints and steel connections, like she was reading a language written in stress patterns and load distributions, finding potential failure points that wouldn't show up on diagnostic equipment for months of operation under normal conditions. When she examined the foundation anchoring system for the main support columns, her fingers traced hairline variations in the concrete surface that indicated uneven curing. Most inspectors would have missed these subtle differences, but Maya identified 3 locations where the concrete had dried too quickly, creating microscopic fractures that would expand under the repeated stress of wind loads and seismic activity. Each discovery was documented with photographic evidence and precise measurements that would allow the engineering team to address the problems before they became structural failures. Her inspection of the steel framework revealed welding inconsistencies that met current safety standards but fell short of the tolerances required for a structure that would house thousands of people daily. She found stress concentrations where beam connections had been rushed during installation, identified bolt torque specifications that were within acceptable ranges but not optimal for long-term stability under dynamic loading conditions. Every finding was recorded with the meticulous detail of someone who understood that other people's lives would depend on the accuracy of her documentation. Word of the incident had started spreading through the construction site in that way that significant events always do in close-knit working environments. Through shift changes and equipment transfers, through casual conversations during break periods and formal briefings between supervisory staff. By the time Maya was halfway through her structural assessment, senior construction managers were finding excuses to walk through the work area and observe her methods firsthand. Construction Superintendent Jake Williams had been overseeing major building projects for 2 decades, working on everything from high-rise residential towers to critical infrastructure installations. He'd supervised the construction of hospitals where structural failure would mean immediate casualties, government buildings where security considerations required construction techniques that weren't taught in standard training programs, and military facilities where the specifications were classified at levels that required security clearances just to review the blueprints. Williams stopped to watch. Maya examined the seismic isolation system that had been installed beneath the main foundation. The earthquake dampening technology was cutting edge, designed to protect both the structure and its occupants during seismic events that could devastate conventional buildings. Most inspectors would have verified that the installation matched the engineering specifications and moved on to the next item on their checklist. Maya was running her hands along the isolation bearings, feeling for vibrations that would indicate improper calibration in the dampening mechanism. The northern array is running approximately 15% higher frequency than the southern array, she said without looking up from her examination. Williams checked his installation records on his tablet. The seismic isolation system had been calibrated by the manufacturer's technical team the previous week, with all components certified as functioning within acceptable parameters. There had been no indications of any problems with the dampening arrays during the post-installation testing phase. How can you tell without running the diagnostic equipment? Williams asked. Mechanical resonance has a signature. When dampening systems aren't perfectly synchronized, you can feel the difference in the vibration patterns transmitted through the mounting structures. She guided his hand to a connection point where the isolation bearing met the foundation framework. Feel the difference in harmonic frequency between this mounting point and the one 15 feet south. Williams had been working with seismic protection systems for over a decade, but he'd never considered that calibration differences might be detectable through tactile examination. When he placed his hand on both mounting points, he could indeed sense a subtle variation in the vibration patterns, a difference so slight that it would require sophisticated measuring instruments to quantify accurately. The frequency differential is small enough that it won't cause immediate problems, Maya continued, but over time, the asymmetric loading will create stress concentrations that could compromise the entire isolation system's effectiveness during a major seismic event. Williams pulled up the calibration records and discovered that the northern array had indeed been installed 2 days later than the southern array, using a slightly different batch of isolation bearings from the same manufacturer. The specifications were identical, but Maya had identified a manufacturing variance that the quality control testing had missed entirely. Her examination of the electrical distribution system revealed grounding issues that met current electrical codes but created potential electromagnetic interference problems that could affect sensitive communications equipment. She identified cable routing that followed standard practices but created electromagnetic field patterns that would interfere with certain types of monitoring devices. Found junction box installations that were properly executed according to commercial building standards but inadequate for structures that might house government communications equipment. Each discovery demonstrated knowledge that went far beyond standard construction expertise. This wasn't textbook learning or certification training. This was field experience earned in environments where equipment failure meant operational compromise and potentially catastrophic mission failure. Maya worked like someone who had maintained critical systems under hostile conditions, who had signed off on installations she'd have to trust with her own life, knowing that her approval was a promise written in blood. Master Electrician Tom Rodriguez had been installing electrical systems in commercial buildings for 15 years, working on projects that ranged from standard office complexes to specialized facilities with unusual power requirements. He'd wired hospitals where electrical failure meant life support systems going offline, data centers where power interruptions could cost millions of dollars in lost information, and government installations where the electrical specifications were classified for national security reasons. Rodriguez was troubleshooting a minor voltage fluctuation in the main distribution panel when Maya approached with her inspection checklist. Most contractors would have verified that the electrical installation matched the approved blueprints and moved on to mechanical systems. Maya was examining junction boxes with the kind of detailed attention that suggested she understood electrical systems on a level that went beyond standard commercial applications. Your neutral grounding is creating electromagnetic signature patterns that will interfere with certain types of sensitive equipment, she said, indicating a series of ground wire connections that appeared perfectly normal to Rodriguez's experience. The grounding meets National Electrical Code requirements, Rodriguez replied. Passed inspection from the County Electrical Authority last week. Code requirements are designed for standard commercial applications. This installation is going to house communications equipment that operates on frequencies where electromagnetic interference becomes a significant operational concern. Rodriguez had worked on government projects before, installations where the electrical specifications included requirements for electromagnetic compatibility that weren't part of standard commercial building codes. But this project was supposed to be a routine shopping complex, not a facility with specialized communications requirements. "What kind of communications equipment are you talking about?" he asked. Maya looked at him directly, her expression neutral, but her eyes holding the kind of awareness that came from working on projects where the wrong question could compromise operational security. The kind that requires electrical installations to meet specifications that aren't included in standard commercial building codes. That response told Rodriguez everything he needed to know about why Maya was conducting inspections that went far beyond routine structural assessment. Because she was right about the electromagnetic interference patterns. The grounding configuration he'd installed would indeed create field distortions that could affect sensitive communications equipment, the kind of interference that wouldn't matter for retail operations but could compromise security systems or monitoring devices. Her inspection of the ventilation system revealed airflow patterns that met building codes for commercial occupancy, but created circulation dead zones that would compromise certain types of air quality monitoring equipment. She identified ductwork routing that followed standard HVAC practices but created acoustic transmission paths that could compromise security in facilities where conversation privacy was a concern. Found filtration system installations that were adequate for commercial air quality requirements but insufficient for environments where biological or chemical threat detection might be necessary. Senior HVAC technician Robert Chun had been installing climate control systems in specialized facilities for over a decade, working on projects that included clean room environments, biological research laboratories, and government installations where air quality control involved considerations that weren't part of standard commercial building requirements. He'd installed systems designed to detect and respond to airborne threats, ventilation networks that could be sealed and pressurized in emergency situations, and filtration technologies that were classified for national security applications. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Chen was adjusting the variable air volume controls for the main climate system when Maya began her examination of the ductwork installation. Most inspectors would have verified that the ventilation system met capacity requirements for the planned occupancy levels and confirmed that all connections were properly sealed according to standard commercial building practices. Maya was tracing airflow patterns with an attention to detail that suggested she understood ventilation systems as potential security vulnerabilities rather than just climate control infrastructure. The return air circulation creates acoustic transmission pathways between different sections of the building, she noted, indicating ductwork routing that appeared completely normal to Chun's experienced assessment. Sound transmission through ductwork is within acceptable levels for commercial applications, Chun replied. Meets all building code requirements for noise control in retail environments. Retail environments don't typically require conversation privacy measures or acoustic isolation for sensitive communications, Maya said. This ductwork configuration would allow sound transmission between areas that might need to be acoustically separated for security reasons. Chun had worked on government installations where acoustic isolation was a critical security requirement, where conversations in one area could not be allowed to transmit to other parts of the facility through ventilation systems. But this project was supposed to be a standard commercial development, not a facility with specialized security requirements. Are you saying this building is going to house something other than retail operations? Chun asked. Maya's expression remained neutral, but her response carried implications that went far beyond routine construction oversight. I'm saying the ventilation installation should meet specifications that account for all potential future uses of the facility, not just the current planned occupancy. By the end of her inspection, Maya had identified 17 different issues that met current building codes, but fell short of specifications required for facilities that might house sensitive government operations. Her report was thorough, professional, and contained recommendations that would ensure the building could accommodate specialized equipment and security, requirements that weren't part of the original commercial development plans. Williams signed off as witness to her findings, his signature carrying the weight of 2 decades of construction management experience. His approval meant that Maya's recommendations would be implemented regardless of the additional cost or schedule delays they might create. "Outstanding work," Williams said quietly as Maya prepared to submit her final documentation. Coming from Williams, that was extraordinary praise. The kind of professional recognition that got repeated in project management meetings and remembered during performance evaluations for years afterward. Collins read Maya's report twice, then looked at her with something approaching professional admiration mixed with growing understanding of why someone with Maya's background had been placed on this particular project. "Where did you really learn to identify these kinds of technical issues?" she asked. "Places were getting the details. Wrong meant people died," Maya replied. "Environments where equipment failure wasn't just inconvenient, it was catastrophic." Collins nodded, understanding that some questions shouldn't be pursued even by people with sufficient clearance to ask them. Maya's inspection had revealed that the Riverside Industrial Complex was being constructed to accommodate requirements that went far beyond standard commercial development, and her recommendations would ensure that those hidden requirements were met without compromising the project's cover as a routine shopping center construction. The duty supervisor approached with the standard work completion documentation, expecting a routine sign-off that would close Maya's inspection assignment and allow the construction schedule to proceed without further delays. But Supervisor Martinez noticed something unusual as Maya reviewed the paperwork. The way she held the pen, the small scars visible on her trigger finger, the calluses on her palms that came from handling precision instruments under extreme conditions rather than standard construction tools. Martinez had served 2 tours in Iraq with the Army Corps of Engineers, working on infrastructure projects in hostile environments where construction crews operated under armed escort and equipment. Failure could compromise base security. He'd seen similar marks on the hands of military specialists who worked with classified systems, operators whose technical expertise went far beyond standard engineering training because their assignments involved equipment that didn't exist in civilian applications. "Thank you, ma'am," Martinez said quietly, his tone carrying the kind of respect that came from recognizing someone whose service had probably saved lives he'd never know about. Professional work. As Maya shouldered her equipment bag and prepared to leave the work site, Collins made a secure phone call to her commanding officer, explaining that the contractor in question had completed her inspection assignment and that any personnel who had shown her disrespect would be receiving immediate counseling on proper treatment of individuals with classified backgrounds. The conversation was brief, but carried implications that would affect disciplinary actions and personnel evaluations for months to come. Morrison stood outside Collins' office at exactly 1500 hours, his work uniform cleaned and pressed, but his hands trembling slightly as he waited for what he knew would be a career-defining conversation. His supervisor, construction foreman Steve Mills, waited beside him with the expression of someone who had already reviewed the incident reports and understood that this meeting wouldn't end well for anyone involved. Staff Sergeant Mills had served in the Marine Corps before transitioning to civilian construction work, and he understood military protocol well enough to recognize when someone had crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. "Remember what we discussed," Mills said quietly. "Tell the truth about what happened. Don't try to justify actions that can't be justified." Accept responsibility and hope they give you a chance to learn from this." The office door opened, and Colin's assistant gestured them inside. The meeting lasted 37 minutes, during which Morrison's understanding of his career prospects changed dramatically. When he emerged, his face was pale, and his future in construction had taken a significant turn toward uncertainty. Extra duty assignments for the remainder of his contract, mandatory training on treatment of personnel with classified backgrounds, a formal letter of reprimand in his permanent employment file, and a strong recommendation that he spend considerable time reflecting on what professional behavior actually meant in high-security construction environments. But the real consequences were already spreading through the construction site like shock waves from an explosion. By the evening shift change, every crew chief and construction supervisor had heard some version of what had happened during the afternoon inspection. The details varied depending on who was telling the story, but the core elements remained consistent. Across all versions, a contractor had been publicly humiliated by junior personnel, and that contractor had turned out to be someone whose background was classified at levels that required federal authorization to access. Master Electrician Rodriguez found Morrison in the workers' break area that evening, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold while he sat there processing the implications of his actions. "Mind if I sit down?" Rodriguez asked, settling into the chair across from Morrison without waiting for a response. Morrison shrugged, his usual swagger completely absent. The confident aggression that had defined his interactions with other workers had been replaced by the subdued demeanor of someone who had learned an expensive lesson about the consequences of poor judgment. "You understand what you did today?" Rodriguez asked, his tone carrying the kind of patience that came from teaching younger workers about aspects of construction work that weren't covered in safety manuals or certification programs. "Everyone keeps asking me that same question," Morrison replied, his voice lacking the defiant edge that had characterized his earlier interactions. "Because everyone wants to make sure you understand the lesson. That woman you humiliated isn't just some contractor who happened to know her job better than you expected. She's the kind of person this entire project exists to support." Morrison looked up from his cold coffee. "How do you know that?" 22 years in this business, you learn to recognize certain indicators. The way she handled her equipment. The way she found problems that our best technicians had missed completely. The way she maintained her professionalism when you tried to break down her dignity. Rodriguez paused, watching the evening maintenance crews prepare equipment for the next day's construction activities. But mostly it was the way Collins reacted when she saw those marks. "I've never seen a project manager look like that before." Morrison was quiet for several minutes, processing information that challenged everything he thought he understood about construction site hierarchies and professional relationships. "What should I have done differently?" Ask questions before making assumptions. Treated her with the respect you'd want if someone was evaluating your work performance. Remembered that professional competence doesn't correlate with how much noise someone makes or how aggressively they assert themselves. Shun found Morrison later that evening, standing at a window overlooking the construction site where the night shift was installing foundation components for the next phase of the project. Security lights illuminated the work areas, creating islands of activity in the darkness that stretched across the industrial complex. "You know what you did today, right?" Chun said quietly, his earlier enthusiasm for recording the incident completely absent from his current demeanor. "Everyone's been explaining it to me in great detail," Morrison replied. "Good, because my uncle served in Afghanistan, worked with military intelligence coordination. He told me about people like her, the ones who completed missions that never officially happened in places we were never officially operating against threats that never officially existed." Chung paused, watching the night crews work under the bright lights, their movements coordinated and efficient as they prepared the foundation for specialized equipment installations that weren't described in the public construction plans. He said you could always identify them by certain characteristics. The way they moved through environments, observing everything without appearing to watch anything specific. The way they carried themselves like they'd survived situations that would have broken most people. The way they maintained professional composure under conditions that would make normal people lose control. Morrison said nothing, but his reflection in the window showed the expression of someone who was beginning to understand the magnitude of his mistake. You humiliated a war hero today. Someone who probably prevented disasters that would have made international headlines if they'd been allowed to happen. And you did it because you thought she looked like an easy target who wouldn't fight back. How was I supposed to know who she was? Morrison asked, his voice carrying frustration rather than defiance. That's exactly the point. You don't know who you're dealing with until you take the time to find out. And by then, it might be too late to change the first impression you've made. Webb approached Morrison during the shift change, when most of the day crew was heading home and the evening maintenance teams were taking over equipment operations. The work site was transitioning from active construction to overnight preparation activities, with different crews handling different aspects of the complex project. Schedule. Morrison, you got a minute? Webb asked, his usual casual demeanor replaced by something more serious. Morrison nodded, following Webb to a quiet area away from the equipment noise and crew briefings that marked the transition between work shifts. I've been thinking about what happened today, Webb said. About what we almost did to that woman, and what it means that we were wrong about who she was. Morrison waited, sensing that Webb had something specific he wanted to communicate. My grandfather served in Vietnam, worked with special operations teams that conducted missions behind enemy lines. He never talked about the details, but he told me enough to understand that some people carry burdens the rest of us can't imagine. Webb looked out at the construction site, where specialized equipment was being positioned for installations that required security clearances and technical expertise that went beyond standard commercial building procedures. He said the real heroes were usually the quiet ones, the people who did the necessary work without seeking recognition or credit, the ones who carried their service with dignity and never demanded special treatment or acknowledgement. Morrison was beginning to understand that his actions had violated principles that went far beyond construction site protocol or workplace behavior standards. We almost destroyed someone's cover identity today, someone who's probably still serving her country in ways we'll never understand, and we nearly compromised her security because we thought it would be entertaining to humiliate her. The weight of that realization settled over Morrison like a physical burden. He'd spent the entire day thinking about his own career prospects and disciplinary consequences, but he hadn't considered the possibility that his actions might have endangered someone whose service continued in ways that required anonymity and protection. What does that mean for her? Morrison asked. I don't know, Webb replied honestly. But I know it means we have to be better than we were today. We have to learn from this and make sure it never happens again to anyone. As the desert evening settled over the Riverside Industrial Complex, casting long shadows across the construction equipment and material stockpiles, Morrison stood alone at the edge of the worksite, looking out at the mountains that formed a jagged silhouette against the darkening sky. The day's heat was finally beginning to dissipate, but the weight of his actions seemed to press down on him with increasing intensity as the full implications became clear. He'd always thought of construction work as straightforward, mechanical, governed by clear rules about materials and techniques and safety protocols. But today had revealed layers of complexity he'd never considered, responsibilities that went beyond building specifications and project schedules. The realization that some of the people working alongside him carried histories and expertise that dwarfed his own experience was humbling in ways he wasn't prepared to handle. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to demonstrate that he'd learned from his mistakes. But tonight, Morrison understood that his career in construction would be forever divided into before and after this day. Before and after he'd learned that assumptions about other people could have consequences that extended far beyond personal embarrassment or workplace discipline. The construction site continued its even transition, with security teams taking their positions and specialized crews beginning overnight operations that weren't visible to casual observation. In the distance, Maya Rodriguez was driving away from the complex, her work completed and documented, her cover identity intact despite the day's complications. Behind her, she left a construction site full of people who would never again assume that quiet competence meant vulnerability, or that someone working alone was someone they could safely underestimate. 3 weeks later, the atmosphere at Riverside Industrial Complex had transformed in ways that weren't immediately visible, but were felt by everyone who worked there. The change wasn't documented in policy manuals or announced through official communications, but it permeated every interaction between workers, every conversation between supervisors and contractors, every moment when someone new arrived on the construction site, when the next civilian contractor arrived for specialized equipment installation. A woman named Dr. Sarah Kim, who was there to calibrate seismic monitoring systems. The reception she received was markedly different from what any contractor had experienced in the previous months. The crew was professional, courteous, and genuinely helpful. They asked about her qualifications and experience instead of making assumptions based on her appearance or demeanor. Dr. Kim was a slight woman in her early 40s, wearing standard safety gear over clothes that suggested office work rather than construction site experience. 3 weeks earlier, her arrival would have triggered comments about her suitability for the work environment, questions about whether she really understood the physical demands of construction work, and probably some unwanted attention from workers who thought she looked out of place among the heavy machinery and industrial noise. Instead, Foreman Mills approached her with the kind of respectful professionalism that he would have shown to any expert contractor. Dr. Kim, I'm Steve Mills, site foreman for this section. Welcome to Riverside Complex. What can we do to help you get your equipment set up? The difference in approach was immediately apparent to Dr. Kim, who had worked on construction sites throughout her career and was accustomed to having to prove her credentials and expertise before receiving basic cooperation from construction crews. I need access to the foundation monitoring points and a secure area for my calibration equipment, she said, expecting the usual bureaucratic obstacles and delays. Absolutely, Mills replied. Martinez will escort you to the monitoring locations and help you with any access requirements. If you need additional security for your equipment or specialized electrical connections, just let us know and we'll coordinate with the appropriate crews. The transformation wasn't limited to interactions with female contractors. When a young engineering graduate named James Chen arrived for his first day as an assistant project manager, the reception he received was similarly professional and supportive. 3 weeks earlier, his obvious inexperience and nervous demeanor would have made him a target for the kind of hazing and intimidation that construction crews sometimes inflicted on newcomers they perceived as weak or unprepared. Instead, construction Superintendent Williams took time to personally orient Chun to the site procedures and safety requirements. Construction sites can be overwhelming when you're new to the field, Williams explained as they walked through the work areas. The noise, the equipment, the pace of operations. Don't hesitate to ask questions if you're uncertain about anything. Everyone here started somewhere, and we all learned by asking questions and observing experienced workers. Shun had been prepared for the hostile environment that his engineering professors had warned him about, the inevitable conflict between college-educated project managers and experienced construction workers who resented academic credentials and theoretical knowledge. Instead, he found himself welcomed into a professional environment where his education was viewed as an asset rather than a liability. The change was most apparent in how workers treated each other during the daily interactions that made up construction site culture. Conversations that had previously included casual sexist comments, ethnic jokes, and dismissive remarks about people who were different had been replaced by more respectful dialogue that acknowledged the diverse backgrounds and experiences of everyone working on the project. Rodriguez observed the transformation during the morning safety briefings that started each work shift. "The culture change is remarkable," he mentioned to Williams during a break between equipment installations. 3 weeks ago, these briefings included comments and attitudes that would have made anyone different feel unwelcome. Now people are actually listening to each other and treating everyone with basic professional respect. Williams nodded, remembering the incident that had catalyzed this cultural shift. Sometimes it takes a significant event to make people realize that their assumptions about others might be completely wrong. What happened with Maya Rodriguez forced everyone to confront the possibility that they don't know who they're working alongside or what experiences those people might have had. The lesson had extended beyond gender relations to encompass broader principles about treating all workers with dignity and respect regardless of their apparent background or experience level. New workers were welcomed and oriented properly instead of being subjected to initiation rituals designed to establish dominance hierarchies. Experienced workers shared knowledge and expertise instead of hoarding information as a source of power over newcomers. Morrison himself had become an unexpected advocate for the cultural changes that were transforming the work environment. His experience with Maya Rodriguez had fundamentally altered his understanding of professional relationships and workplace dynamics. During a conversation with new workers who had joined his crew, he shared insights that would have been unimaginable from him just weeks earlier. "The most important thing you can learn working construction is that assumptions about people are dangerous," Morrison explained to a group of apprentice electricians who were beginning their first major project assignment. "You might think you know someone's capabilities or background based on how they look or how they present themselves, but you're probably wrong. The smartest approach is to treat everyone with respect until they prove they don't deserve it." One of the apprentices, a young woman named Maria Santos, who was the first female electrician the company had hired in several years, listened with particular attention to Morrison's advice. She had arrived at Riverside Complex expecting to face the kind of discrimination and harassment that women in construction trades often encountered, but instead found herself working with crews who seemed genuinely committed to professional behavior and mutual respect. "How do you know if someone deserves respect?" Santos asked, testing whether Morrison's apparent change in attitude was genuine or just politically correct language designed to avoid further disciplinary problems. "Everyone deserves basic human respect," Morrison replied. "The question is whether they've earned additional respect through their competence, experience, and professional behavior. But you start with the assumption that people are worthy of dignity, not the assumption that they have to prove themselves to you." The conversation continued during lunch break, with Morrison sharing insights about professional development and workplace relationships that demonstrated genuine personal growth rather than superficial compliance with new behavioral expectations. His transformation had become an example for other workers who were adjusting their own attitudes and approaches to interpersonal relationships. Chun, the young assistant project manager, found himself benefiting from the changed atmosphere in ways that extended far beyond basic courtesy. Senior construction workers were actively sharing knowledge and expertise that would accelerate his professional development and help him understand the practical aspects of construction management that weren't covered in engineering school. "The theoretical knowledge you learned in college is important," explained Master Carpenter Bob Johnson during a discussion about structural design principles. "But understanding how those theories translate into real-world construction practices requires hands-on experience and mentorship from people who've been solving practical problems for years." Johnson had previously been dismissive of college-educated managers who lacked field experience, viewing them as obstacles to efficient construction operations rather than valuable team members. The cultural shift at Riverside Complex had created an environment where theoretical knowledge and practical experience were viewed as complementary rather than competitive approaches to construction challenges. I've learned more about actual construction techniques in the past 2 weeks than I did in 4 years of engineering school, Shun confided to Dr. Kim during one of their interactions on the monitoring system installation. The workers here are treating me like a colleague instead of an unwelcome outsider, and they're sharing knowledge that I couldn't get from textbooks or classroom lectures. Dr. Kim had observed similar changes in her interactions with construction crews at other projects, but the transformation at Riverside Complex was more comprehensive and authentic than the superficial behavior modifications she had seen elsewhere. Whatever happened here 3 weeks ago had a profound impact on workplace culture, she noted. This level of professional respect and mutual support is rare in construction environments. The changes weren't limited to interactions between different types of workers. The overall efficiency and effectiveness of construction operations had improved significantly as workers began collaborating more effectively and sharing information that prevented mistakes and delays. Projects that had previously been slowed by communication problems and territorial disputes were proceeding ahead of schedule. Collins documented the operational improvements in her quarterly project review, noting that workplace incidents had decreased by 70% while productivity had increased measurably across all construction crews. The correlation between respectful workplace culture and operational efficiency is striking, she wrote in her report to corporate management. Investing in professional behavior training and cultural development appears to generate tangible returns in project performance. But the most significant indicator of cultural transformation was visible in how workers responded to new challenges and unexpected situations. When a delivery truck carrying specialized monitoring equipment broke down outside the construction site, creating a potential delay that could have cost thousands of dollars in schedule disruptions, the response demonstrated the kind of collaborative problem-solving that hadn't existed before Maya Rodriguez's incident. Instead of the finger-pointing and blame-shifting that had characterized previous crisis responses, workers from different crews immediately began coordinating solutions. Electricians offered to help unload sensitive equipment. Heavy equipment operators volunteered to assist with transportation logistics, and supervisors from different departments worked together to minimize schedule impacts. 3 weeks ago, this kind of problem would have turned into a disaster, Mills observed as he watched crews efficiently address the delivery crisis. Everyone would have been protecting their own interests and blaming other departments for the complications. Now they're working together like they're all part of the same team instead of competing factions. The transformation had created a work environment where people felt safe to ask questions, admit uncertainties, and seek help when they encountered problems beyond their expertise. This psychological safety had eliminated many of the mistakes and accidents that occurred when workers tried to handle situations they weren't qualified to address rather than admitting they needed assistance. Morrison's personal transformation had become a symbol of the broader cultural changes occurring throughout the construction site. His willingness to acknowledge his mistakes and modify his behavior had encouraged other workers to examine their own attitudes and assumptions about professional relationships and workplace dynamics. During the evening shift change, when day crews were finishing their assignments and night maintenance teams were beginning their operations, Morrison often found himself in conversations with workers who were processing their own understanding of what professional behavior meant in a diverse workplace environment. I never realized how many assumptions I was making about people until I saw what happened to you, admitted Webb during one of these conversations. It made me think about all the times I've probably misjudged someone's capabilities or background based on superficial impressions. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. These discussions had become a regular feature of shift transitions. Informal mentoring sessions where experienced workers shared insights about professional development and workplace relationships with newer team members. The conversations weren't mandated by management or structured according to formal training programs, but they had emerged organically as workers recognized the value of learning from each other's experiences and perspectives. The cultural transformation at Riverside Industrial Complex had created ripple effects that extended beyond the immediate construction site, influencing how workers approached their professional relationships in other contexts and how they talked about workplace dynamics with friends and family members outside the construction industry. The revelation came during a routine quality inspection when Collins was reviewing Maya's structural assessment documentation. Something in the technical language caught her attention, terminology that wasn't typically used in commercial construction reports, but was familiar from her years working with classified military projects. Phrases like electromagnetic signature mitigation and structural load redistribution for dynamic threat scenarios suggested knowledge that went far beyond civilian contractor expertise. Collins pulled Maya's personnel file and began cross-referencing the technical specifications Maya had identified against classified project requirements that weren't supposed to be known by civilian contractors. Every recommendation Maya had made aligned perfectly with specifications for facilities designed to house sensitive government operations, communications equipment that required electromagnetic shielding, and structural systems capable of withstanding deliberate attack rather than just environmental stresses. The realization hit Collins like a physical blow. Maya hadn't just stumbled onto structural problems that happened to align with classified requirements. She had systematically identified every aspect of the construction that needed modification to support covert government operations. Her inspection hadn't been routine quality control. It had been a classified security assessment disguised as commercial contractor oversight. Collins reached for her secure phone and dialed a number that connected directly to military intelligence coordination. "This is Collins at Riverside Complex. I need to speak with whoever authorized the placement of classified personnel in contractor positions." The response was immediate and unambiguous. "Ma'am, you're not cleared for information about personnel assignments at your location. Your job is to provide support for all authorized contractors and ensure project completion according to specifications." "I understand operational security requirements," Collins pressed, "but I need to know if Maya Rodriguez is operating under deep cover or if she's genuinely a civilian contractor who happens to have classified background knowledge." A longer pause, during which Collins could hear the sound of secure communications being initiated in the background. "Ma'am, what I can tell you is that all personnel at your location have been cleared for their assigned duties. Beyond that, you should proceed with normal project operations and provide whatever support is requested." The call ended, leaving Collins with more questions than answers, but absolute certainty that Maya Rodriguez was far more than she appeared to be. The technical expertise Maya had demonstrated wasn't something that could be learned through civilian training or acquired through normal construction experience. It was knowledge that came from direct involvement with classified military systems and operations that officially didn't exist. Meanwhile, Maya continued working with the same methodical precision that had characterized her initial inspection. But now Collins understood that every action Maya took served multiple purposes. When Maya examined electrical junction boxes, she wasn't just checking commercial building codes. She was evaluating electromagnetic security vulnerabilities. When she tested ventilation systems, she wasn't just verifying air quality compliance. She was assessing biological threat detection capabilities. Her work schedule followed patterns that seemed random but actually provided comprehensive coverage of all security-sensitive installations without appearing to focus on any particular system. She arrived at different times, worked on different sections of the project, and maintained the appearance of routine contractor activity, while systematically evaluating every aspect of the facility's classified capabilities. Collins began observing Maya's methods with new understanding of what she was witnessing. Maya's tool bag contained standard construction equipment, but also specialized instruments that could detect electronic surveillance devices, measure electromagnetic field strengths, and analyze structural stress patterns that might indicate tampering or sabotage attempts. Her inspection reports included coded information that looked like routine technical documentation, but actually communicated security assessments to recipients who knew how to interpret the embedded intelligence the other workers had accepted. Maya's return to the construction site as evidence of her professional dedication and refusal to be intimidated by Morrison's harassment. They treated her with the respect and courtesy that had become standard since the incident, offering assistance with equipment transportation and coordination with other construction crews. None of them suspected that Maya's presence served purposes that went far beyond quality control and safety compliance. Rodriguez approached Maya during a break period, carrying a cup of coffee and wearing the expression of someone who wanted to apologize for behavior he hadn't been directly involved in, but felt responsible for as a member of the construction community. "Ma'am, I wanted to say again how sorry we all are about what happened last week." Morrison was completely out of line, and the rest of us should have stopped it before it went as far as it did. Maya looked up from her documentation, her expression neutral but not unfriendly. Professional work environments require everyone to maintain appropriate standards. When that doesn't happen, problems need to be addressed through proper channels. Is there anything we can do to make sure you feel comfortable and safe working here? Rodriguez asked. Additional security, different work schedules, whatever you need. I appreciate the consideration, Maya replied. But the best thing anyone can do is continue treating all workers with the respect and professionalism that should be standard in any workplace. The conversation was brief and professional, but Rodriguez walked away with the impression that Maya was someone who had dealt with far more serious challenges than workplace harassment and had developed coping mechanisms that went beyond what most people would need in civilian environments. Her calm competence and refusal to be rattled by adversity suggested experience with situations where maintaining composure wasn't just personally important, but potentially critical for operational success. Williams had begun including Maya in supervisory meetings where her technical expertise could contribute to project planning and problem solving. During these sessions, Maya demonstrated knowledge of construction techniques and security considerations that impressed even experienced project managers. Her recommendations often anticipated problems that wouldn't become apparent for weeks or months, preventing delays and cost overruns that could have compromised the entire project timeline. Her understanding of systems integration is extraordinary, Williams confided to Collins during a private conversation. She sees connections between different building systems that most contractors miss completely. It's like she's working from a blueprint that includes information the rest of us don't have access to. Collins nodded, understanding exactly why Maya's knowledge seemed so comprehensive. Because Maya was working from information that included classified specifications and security requirements that weren't part of the standard construction documentation. Her ability to anticipate problems came from understanding the facility's true purpose and the operational requirements that drove design decisions that seemed arbitrary to contractors who only saw the commercial building plans. The security implications of Maya's presence had become increasingly clear to Collins as she observed Maya's work patterns and reviewed her technical recommendations. Maya wasn't just ensuring that the facility would meet classified requirements. She was also evaluating potential security vulnerabilities and assessing whether the construction process itself might have compromised operational security through inadvertent intelligence leaks or foreign surveillance. Every contractor who worked on the project was potentially a security risk, either through deliberate espionage activities or innocent conversations that might reveal information about unusual construction specifications. Maya's role included monitoring other workers for signs of unusual interest in aspects of the project that might indicate intelligence-gathering activities. Collins realized that Maya had probably been observing Morrison and his crew long before the harassment incident occurred. Their aggressive behavior and willingness to violate professional standards made them potential security risks who might be susceptible to recruitment by foreign intelligence services or could compromise operational security through careless behavior. The incident that had exposed Maya's background had actually served a valuable purpose by demonstrating how different workers responded to crisis situations and revealing personality characteristics that might affect their trustworthiness in security-sensitive environments. Morrison's poor judgment and lack of self-control marked him as someone who couldn't be trusted with access to classified information or sensitive areas of the facility. Chun's decision to record the incident showed similar poor judgment and disregard for operational security, even though his motivations were entertainment rather than malice. His willingness to share potentially sensitive information through social media demonstrated the kind of careless behavior that could compromise classified operations. Through seemingly innocent posts that revealed more than the poster intended, Webb's passive participation in the harassment showed that he could be influenced by group pressure to engage in activities he might not initiate himself, making him potentially vulnerable to manipulation by hostile intelligence operatives who use social pressure and peer influence as recruitment tactics. Maya's assessment of the construction crew's security reliability had probably been completed within days of the harassment incident, with her conclusions communicated through channels that Collins wasn't cleared to know about. Personnel decisions and security clearance modifications would be made based on Maya's recommendations, affecting who would be allowed to work on sensitive aspects of the project as it moved toward completion. The technical specifications Maya had identified weren't just construction improvements. They were security enhancements that would protect classified operations from electronic surveillance, acoustic monitoring, and physical infiltration attempts. Her recommendations would make the facility capable of housing intelligence operations, secure communications equipment, and sensitive data processing systems without detection by foreign intelligence services. Collins understood that she was witnessing the integration of classified security requirements into what appeared to be routine commercial construction, a process that required expertise and clearance levels that went far beyond standard project management capabilities. Maya's presence ensured that security considerations were addressed during the construction phase rather than requiring expensive modifications after the facility became operational. The other contractors working on the project had no idea that their seemingly routine construction activities were creating a facility capable of supporting classified government operations. Their professional work was contributing to national security objectives while maintaining the appearance of standard commercial development that wouldn't attract attention from foreign intelligence services or domestic surveillance activities. Maya's careful documentation of every security enhancement would provide the foundation for operational planning and threat assessment activities that would begin once the facility was complete. Her reports would inform decisions about what types of classified operations could be safely conducted in the facility and what additional security measures might be required for specific mission requirements. The transformation of workplace culture that had followed Morrison's harassment of Maya had actually enhanced operational security by creating an environment where workers were more observant and protective of each other. The increased professionalism and mutual respect made it less likely that hostile intelligence operatives could exploit interpersonal conflicts or workplace tensions to gain access to sensitive information. Collins realized that the incident had served multiple purposes in Maya's mission, revealing security vulnerabilities in personnel management, while catalyzing cultural changes that improved overall operational security. Maya's willingness to maintain her cover and continue working despite the compromise of her classified background demonstrated the kind of professional dedication that made covert operations possible. As the construction project approached completion, Collins understood that Maya's role would evolve from security assessment to operational preparation, ensuring that the facility was ready to support whatever classified activities it had been designed to accommodate. The successful integration of security requirements into commercial construction represented a model that could be replicated at other locations where covert government operations required similar camouflage and protection. The immediate consequences began manifesting within hours of Collins' final security report reaching the appropriate channels. Morrison received notification that his employment contract would not be renewed upon completion of the current project phase, with recommendations that he seek additional professional development training before applying for positions on future construction projects. The decision was presented as a routine personnel evaluation, but Morrison understood that his career in high-security construction work had effectively ended. Chen faced similar consequences, though his younger age and apparent willingness to learn from his mistakes earned him a second chance with significant conditions attached. His security clearance application was flagged for additional review. His access to sensitive areas of the construction site was permanently revoked, and he was required to complete extensive training on operational security and professional conduct before being considered for future assignments. Webb's passive participation in the harassment earned him a formal reprimand and mandatory counseling sessions, designed to help him understand the importance of intervening when witnessing inappropriate behavior. His career prospects weren't permanently damaged, but the incident would follow him through performance evaluations and security reviews for years to come. The personnel actions were implemented with the quiet efficiency that characterized military justice systems, creating consequences that were severe enough to send clear messages about acceptable behavior, while avoiding public attention that might compromise operational security. Workers throughout the construction site understood that something significant had happened, but the specific details remained within official channels that protected classified information. Rodriguez emerged from the incident with enhanced respect from supervisors and colleagues who had observed his attempts to de-escalate the situation and protect Maya from harassment. His professional reputation was strengthened by his demonstration of moral courage and commitment to workplace safety that went beyond personal self-interest. Williams used the incident as a teaching opportunity during supervisory training sessions, emphasizing the importance of treating all personnel with respect, regardless of their apparent background or qualifications. His leadership during the crisis had demonstrated the kind of professional judgment that led to promotion opportunities and increased responsibilities in future projects. Collins found herself selected for advanced security training that would qualify her for project management roles in facilities with higher classification levels and more complex operational requirements. Her handling of the Maya Rodriguez situation had demonstrated competence in managing security-sensitive personnel issues, while maintaining operational effectiveness and project security. Maya continued her work with the same methodical precision that had characterized her approach from the beginning, but now her role expanded to include final security verification and operational readiness assessment. Her comprehensive knowledge of the facility's classified capabilities made her invaluable for ensuring that all systems were properly integrated and ready to support whatever missions they had been designed to accommodate. The cultural transformation that had followed Morrison's harassment had created lasting changes in how workers approached professional relationships and workplace dynamics. Monthly training sessions were implemented to reinforce principles of mutual respect and professional behavior, with specific emphasis on recognizing and responding to inappropriate conduct before it escalated to harassment or discrimination. Safety briefings began including discussions of security awareness and the importance of maintaining operational security through careful attention to what information was shared with whom and under what circumstances. Workers learned to recognize signs of potential intelligence, gathering activities, and understood their responsibilities for reporting suspicious behavior through appropriate channels. The construction site security protocols were enhanced based on Maya's recommendations, creating multiple layers of protection that would safeguard classified operations without interfering with normal construction activities. Access controls were implemented that appeared routine, but actually created comprehensive monitoring of who entered sensitive areas and what activities they conducted, while their communication procedures were established that allowed workers to report security concerns or unusual incidents through channels that ensured appropriate investigation without compromising ongoing operations. Workers understood that some aspects of the project required special handling but weren't given details that might compromise their own security or the facility's operational effectiveness. The incident had revealed vulnerabilities in personnel screening and workplace culture that existed throughout the construction industry, leading to systematic improvements in how workers were selected, trained, and supervised on projects with security implications. Background investigations became more thorough, focusing not just on criminal history but on personality, characteristics, and behavioral patterns that might affect reliability in sensitive environments. Professional development programs were expanded to include training on recognizing and respecting diversity in workplace environments, with particular emphasis on understanding that competence and expertise could exist in people who didn't fit traditional stereotypes about construction workers. Workers learned to evaluate colleagues based on performance and professional behavior rather than assumptions about their backgrounds or capabilities. The success of the cultural transformation at Riverside Complex became a model for other construction projects with security requirements, demonstrating that workplace culture improvements could enhance both operational security and project efficiency. Other project managers began implementing similar approaches to personnel management and professional development, creating industry-wide improvements in how construction crews approached workplace relationships. Maya's final security assessment documented not just the technical specifications of the completed facility, but also the human factors that would affect its operational security. Her evaluation of personnel reliability, workplace culture, and security awareness provided the foundation for decisions about who would be allowed to work on future phases of the project and what additional security measures might be required. Assessment included recommendations for ongoing security monitoring and periodic reassessment of personnel who would have access to the facility once it became operational. Maya's insights into individual workers' reliability and professional judgment would inform security clearance decisions and access control protocols for years to come. The technical systems Maya had helped design and implement created a facility capable of supporting intelligence operations, secure communications, and data processing activities that required protection from foreign surveillance and electronic intelligence gathering. The integration of these capabilities into what appeared to be routine commercial construction represented a significant achievement in covert facility development. Her documentation of the construction process provided a blueprint for replicating similar security integrations at other locations where classified operations required commercial cover. The techniques developed at Riverside Complex would inform future projects where government operations needed to be concealed within apparently routine civilian activities. The personnel management innovations that had emerged from the harassment incident created new standards for how workers with security clearances should be selected, trained, and supervised in environments where operational security depended on human reliability as much as technical protection. The lessons learned about workplace culture and professional behavior would influence security protocols at facilities throughout the defense establishment. Collins' final project report documented the successful integration of commercial construction activities with classified security requirements, demonstrating that civilian contractors could effectively support covert operations when properly managed and supervised. Her report became required reading for project managers working on similar facilities, providing guidance on balancing operational security with construction efficiency. The report included detailed analysis of how workplace culture affected operational security, showing that professional behavior and mutual respect among workers created environments where security violations were less likely to occur. The correlation between positive workplace relationships and effective security protocols became an important factor in personnel selection and training for future projects. Maya's role in the project's success was documented in classified channels that recognized her contribution to national security while protecting her cover identity for future assignments. Her demonstrated ability to maintain operational effectiveness while under personal stress had proven her value for missions where psychological resilience was as important as technical expertise. The facility's completion marked the successful integration of multiple complex systems that would support classified operations for decades to come. The construction had proceeded on schedule and within budget while meeting security requirements that hadn't been publicly acknowledged, but were essential for the facility's true purpose. Workers who had participated in the project carried forward improved understanding of professional behavior and security awareness that would benefit future construction activities throughout their careers. The training and cultural development they had received would influence workplace relationships at other job sites, creating ripple effects that extended far beyond the immediate project. The incident that had begun with harassment and humiliation had ultimately strengthened both the facility's security and the professional development of everyone involved. Maya's willingness to maintain her mission despite personal challenges had ensured that classified operations would have the secure foundation they required while demonstrating the resilience and dedication that made covert operations possible. Lessons learned about respecting diversity and recognizing expertise regardless of its source had created lasting improvements in how construction workers approached professional relationships. The understanding that assumptions about people's backgrounds could be dangerously wrong had fostered environments where competence was evaluated fairly and expertise was recognized, regardless of its source. The successful completion of the Riverside Industrial Complex represented more than just another construction project. It demonstrated that civilian infrastructure could effectively support classified operations when the right personnel, procedures, and cultural standards were implemented. The facility would serve national security interests for decades while maintaining its appearance as routine commercial development, protecting both its operations and the personnel who conducted them. 6 months after the incident at Riverside Industrial Complex, the ripple effects had spread throughout the construction industry in ways that transformed how workers approached professional relationships and workplace dynamics across multiple projects and companies. The story of what had happened, carefully stripped of classified details, but retaining its essential lessons about respect and assumptions, had become part of the informal education that experienced workers shared with newcomers to the industry. Construction foremen at projects across the region began incorporating discussions of professional behavior and workplace respect into their safety briefings and orientation programs. The message was consistent. Assumptions about people's backgrounds and capabilities were not just morally wrong, but potentially dangerous to project success and workplace safety. Workers learned to evaluate colleagues based on performance and competence rather than superficial characteristics or stereotypical expectations. The cultural changes weren't limited to gender, relations, or interactions with civilian contractors. The broader principle of treating all workers with dignity and respect had transformed how construction crews handled disputes, managed stress during difficult projects, and supported each other through the physical and emotional challenges that characterized their demanding profession. Workplace incidents involving harassment, discrimination, or bullying had decreased significantly across multiple construction sites. At Riverside Complex itself, the transformation had become institutionalized through formal policies and training programs that ensured new workers understood the professional standards expected of them. Collins had developed comprehensive orientation materials that emphasized both technical competence and interpersonal skills as essential requirements for success in modern construction environments. The construction industry has evolved beyond the old stereotypes about rough, aggressive behavior being necessary for getting the job done. Collins explained to a group of new supervisors during a training session. Professional competence and mutual respect actually improve project efficiency and safety outcomes. Workers who feel valued and respected are more likely to share important information, ask questions when they're uncertain, and take initiative to solve problems before they become serious issues. The training materials included case studies based on the Maya Rodriguez incident, though her name and specific details were changed to protect operational security while preserving the educational value of the experience. New workers learned about the importance of questioning their assumptions, the value of diverse perspectives in problem solving, and the professional obligation to intervene when witnessing inappropriate behavior. Maya herself had transitioned to new assignments that utilize her unique combination of technical expertise and operational experience, though the specific nature of her continued service remained classified. Her successful completion of the Riverside project had demonstrated the viability of using civilian contractor positions as cover for security operations, leading to similar assignments at other facilities where covert government activities required commercial camouflage. The personnel file that tracked her civilian identity showed a routine progression through increasingly responsible construction oversight positions, each assignment carefully selected to provide legitimate reasons for her presence at facilities with classified capabilities. Her professional reputation as a thorough and competent inspector had been enhanced by the successful completion of the Riverside project, making her valuable for future missions where technical expertise and security awareness were equally important. Morrison had eventually found employment with a smaller construction company that specialized in residential projects, where his technical skills were adequate and the security requirements were minimal. The incident at Riverside had forced him to confront aspects of his personality and behavior that he'd never examined before, leading to genuine personal growth that extended beyond workplace relationships to his interactions with family and community members. During a conversation with his new supervisor, Morrison reflected on the lessons he'd learned from his encounter with Maya Rodriguez. "I used to think that being aggressive and assertive was the same thing as being strong and competent," he admitted. "But I learned that real strength comes from treating people with respect and recognizing that everyone has something valuable to contribute, even if it's not immediately obvious." His transformation had become an example for other workers who struggled with similar issues around respect, authority, and professional behavior. Morrison's willingness to acknowledge his mistakes and demonstrate genuine change had earned him a second chance in an industry where reputation and professional relationships were crucial for career advancement. Chun had completed his mandatory training in security awareness education, emerging with enhanced understanding of operational security principles and professional conduct standards. His experience at Riverside had motivated him to pursue additional education in construction management and security protocols, leading to opportunities and projects where his combination of technical knowledge and security awareness made him valuable. "The incident taught me that careless behavior can have consequences," that extend far beyond immediate embarrassment, Chun explained to other young workers during informal mentoring sessions. When you're working on projects with security implications, every action you take and every word you say can affect operational success and other people's safety. Professional responsibility means thinking before you act and considering the broader implications of your decisions. His commitment to learning from his mistakes had impressed supervisors who recognized the value of workers who understood both technical requirements and security considerations. Chun's career trajectory had actually been enhanced by his willingness to acknowledge his errors and demonstrate substantial improvement in judgment and professional behavior. Rodriguez had emerged from the incident with enhanced leadership responsibilities and opportunities to influence workplace culture across multiple construction projects. His intervention during Maya's harassment had demonstrated moral courage and professional judgment that marked him as someone capable of handling supervisory responsibilities and complex interpersonal situations. The construction industry attracts people from diverse backgrounds who bring different experiences and perspectives to their work, Rodriguez observed during a presentation to other construction professionals. Our job as leaders is to create environments where everyone can contribute their best work while feeling safe and respected. That's not just morally right, it's also the most effective way to complete complex projects successfully. His reputation as someone who stood up for professional standards and workplace safety had led to consulting opportunities with other companies that wanted to improve their workplace culture and reduce incidents involving harassment or discrimination. Rodriguez's practical experience in managing workplace conflicts made him valuable for training programs and policy development initiatives. Williams had been promoted to regional construction manager, with responsibilities that included overseeing multiple projects and ensuring that professional standards were maintained across all construction sites under his supervision. His handling of the Maya Rodriguez situation had demonstrated leadership capabilities that extended beyond technical project management to include personnel development and workplace culture management. Effective project management requires understanding that construction success depends on human factors as much as technical specifications, Williams explained during a conference presentation to other construction managers. When workers feel respected and valued, they're more likely to share critical information, take initiative to solve problems, and maintain the high safety standards that protect everyone on the job site. His approach to leadership had influenced management practices throughout the construction industry, demonstrating that authoritarian management styles were less effective than collaborative approaches that recognized the expertise and contributions of all team members. Williams' success had become a model for other managers who wanted to improve both project outcomes and workplace satisfaction. The Riverside Industrial Complex itself had become operational as a mixed-use facility that appeared to house routine commercial and light industrial activities while actually supporting classified government operations that remained invisible to casual observation. The security enhancements Maya had implemented during construction provided multiple layers of protection for activities that contributed to national security without attracting attention from foreign intelligence services or domestic surveillance. Facility success had validated the concept of integrating classified capabilities into apparently routine civilian infrastructure, leading to similar projects at other locations where covert operations required commercial cover. The construction techniques and security protocols developed at Riverside had become standard procedures for facilities where government activities needed to remain hidden within civilian environments. Maya's comprehensive documentation of the construction process had become a training resource for other operatives who needed to understand how classified capabilities could be integrated into civilian infrastructure without compromising operational security. Her insights into personnel management and workplace culture had influenced security protocols at facilities throughout the defense establishment, The incident that had begun with harassment and humiliation had ultimately strengthened both the facility's security and the professional development of everyone involved, demonstrating that crisis situations could become opportunities for positive change when handled with appropriate leadership and commitment to learning from mistakes. The broader impact on the construction industry had been significant, with professional organizations incorporating lessons about workplace respect and security, awareness into their certification programs, and continuing education requirements. Workers throughout the industry had access to training materials that emphasized the importance of professional behavior and the dangers of making assumptions about colleagues' backgrounds or capabilities. Industry publications had featured articles about the importance of creating inclusive workplace environments where diverse perspectives were valued and respected. Though the specific details of the Riverside incident remained protected by security classifications, the general principles of professional behavior and mutual respect had become standard topics in construction management, education, and supervisor training programs. The transformation had created lasting changes in how construction workers approached their professional relationships and responsibilities, establishing new standards for workplace behavior that would influence the industry for generations to come. Workers who had learned these lessons would carry them forward to other projects and other companies, creating continuous improvement in professional standards and workplace culture. The incident at Riverside Industrial Complex had demonstrated that individual actions could have consequences that extended far beyond immediate circumstances, affecting workplace culture, professional development, and operational security in ways that influenced entire industries and communities. Maya Rodriguez's quiet strength and professional resilience had catalyzed changes that would protect and empower workers for decades to come, proving that sometimes the most significant victories came not from dramatic confrontations, but from maintaining dignity and competence under pressure while inspiring others to examine their own assumptions and behavior. Have you ever witnessed someone being underestimated because they chose quiet competence over loud self-promotion? Share your thoughts in the comments below about times when assumptions about people proved dangerously wrong. If this story reminded you of someone who never received the recognition they deserved for their expertise and dedication, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about hidden heroes who changed the world through professional excellence rather than seeking attention. Send this to someone who's ever been dismissed or underestimated simply because they didn't fit others' expectations. Because what happened at Riverside Complex shows that respect is earned through character and competence, not volume and aggression. Construction site stands completed now, its true purpose hidden beneath the facade of ordinary commercial development. Security cameras disguised as standard surveillance equipment monitor approaches that seem routine, but actually protect operations that officially don't exist. Maya Rodriguez has moved on to new assignments, her civilian identity intact, her mission successful, but her impact resonates through every conversation about workplace respect, every moment when someone chooses to ask questions instead of making assumptions, every time a worker stands up for a colleague being treated unfairly. The lesson she taught without saying a word continues spreading through construction sites across the country. The quiet ones often carry the heaviest burdens and the most dangerous secrets. Morrison now mentors young workers about professional behavior, sharing hard-earned wisdom about treating everyone with dignity. Chun has become a security-conscious project manager who understands that careless actions can compromise more than just construction schedules. Rodriguez leads teams with the knowledge that moral courage creates stronger workplaces than intimidation ever could. The facility they built together serves its classified purpose while appearing completely ordinary, a testament to the power of hidden expertise and quiet competence. Maya's story reminds us that heroes don't always announce themselves with fanfare. Sometimes they show up in work clothes, fix what's broken, and disappear into the crowd, leaving only the evidence of their excellence behind. In a world that rewards the loudest voices, remember that the most dangerous people are often the ones who don't need to tell you how dangerous they are. The real heroes are frequently the ones who never get recognition ceremonies. And when you think you know exactly who you're dealing with, you might discover you don't know anything at all. What assumptions have you made about quiet colleagues that proved completely wrong? Drop your stories in the comments and hit subscribe, because every day, hidden heroes walk among us and their stories deserve to be told.